the new person's here and wanting to get started, but we still got a lot of work to do. My job has been to stay out of the way and to learn. And I've learned a lot in the short days or short meetings that I've been able to attend, and I'm really grateful for their work, and I look forward to fully transitioning with them. I'd also like to thank the many MMSD community members who participated in the search. As some of you know, it was a 2-day process, and I met a lot of, well, I'll say it this way. I met people that I'd never met before, and I certainly was able to reconnect with folks that were familiar to me. And it was true at the end that it felt really good to be able to share with them what I'd like to bring to Madison and why they should hire me. So I'm grateful for them for participating in the search. A special word of thanks to Principal Quisted. She already let it out of the bag, but some of you know that when it's time for your first child to go to school, it can be a pretty emotional transition. And in 2002, our firstborn, Gabriella, was set to go to kindergarten. I was teaching and coaching at La Follette, so I've got to give credit to my wife, Mary. She took Gabby to school on her first day. And the first principal that we dropped our child off with in the MMSD was Lisa Quisted. So that's a name that is forever in our home. Somebody who we deeply respect, care for, because the way she cared for us and countless other LVM Bobcats at the time, and certainly through her leadership trajectory, the rest of the Madison Metropolitan School District. So thank you, Lisa, so much for your great leadership. So a few things that I also want to share about my transition. I know that so many people have been eager to speak with me, and I want very much to form solid, sustained relationships with our press and media community. It's important to me that we are able to share together. I understand that there will be times that are challenging, but there's also a lot of really good times as well that I want to work in partnership with. I was tentatively scheduled to have a press conference in May, but there was some pending work that I had to attend to in St. Paul that required me to be there around the clock, and I was not able to hold that meeting. So it did delay some of these first introductory comments and communication with you that I wanted to share. And then lastly, I was in the midst of formalizing this transition, of making sure that I could find the right time to get to Madison and depart from St. Paul, to be here, to be present, and to begin this journey, to begin this work. And that took some time for both boards, respectfully, to make sure that they were both comfortable with that transition plan. So as I begin with, I want you to think of these 3 things in the way that I work with communities, the way that I show up in community, because these are things that are always, these 3 are always on my mind. The first is people. Madison Metropolitan School District is an organization of people, from students who are experiencing their first schooling experience to students who have been successful through most of their education, or students who have struggled, parents, community members, staff, staff who have been around forever, like Ms. Blythe, who's been here since 1991, I met earlier today, to folks who are brand new here, maybe their first year being a leader at Thoreau Elementary. And that's the great part about MMSD. We are collective. And I think that in order for us to be effective, we have to get to know one another and value each other in the way that we work. But students, I'm going to look at you. The way that we accomplish anything great is together. I've rarely met anyone or anything that has been successful because of one person. Does that sound right? Okay, whether it's a sports team or whether it's a classroom project that you're working on, it is a collective. It's the way that we come together. And guess what? Sometimes we're going to disagree. Sometimes it isn't going to feel really good. And sometimes we have to go through some of those struggles. But if we do it together, I believe that we can accomplish it. I believe that we can get through any of those challenges as long as we work together. It's really important to me that people are at the center of the work that we do. The second is purpose. I walked through the doors of Thoreau today. Why am I walking into a school? What is the purpose of Thoreau? What is the purpose of our schools in Madison? The purpose is to ensure that you reach your highest potential possible. And it isn't just one place that students get to. It's meeting students where they are, getting to know you as an individual, finding ways that you're unique and honoring that and making sure that that can be part of your learning. We want to be excellent facilitators of learning. That's why schools exist. That's the purpose of schools. So purpose is really important to me. And the good thing about purpose is that the way that the world is changing around us, There's new things being developed and new things to learn all the time. And it can be really challenging, but it's really exciting too, to think about being a third, fourth, or fifth grader. Again, I don't want to go back, but part of me says it'd be pretty cool too. It really does. The last, and some of the speakers previously mentioned it, being a Madisonian, pride is really important to me. And not pride like I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of Madison. I'm proud of work I've done in the past and relationships that I've formed in the past. It makes me really proud of this city, this community. So that's part of it. But the pride that I'm talking about is the places that we want to go together. The places that the Madison Metropolitan School District wants to move together. The work that we want to do, what we want to accomplish, ensuring that our students are at the center, that staff are valued and supported, that the community feels that they know what's going on in the school and they can participate and be part of it too. Madison schools belong to the community. They belong to the community, and we have to do this work together, and I'm proud to be back here, to be in Madison, leading this really great and exciting work. Just a few quick priorities before I turn it over to our press and our students. You might want to know about what some of my priorities are, and I'm not going to get really detailed today. That's not truly the purpose, but I do want you to know some of the things that I'm looking at and spending this week here now and when I arrive in May 20th, when I start. I'm going to be looking to continue to work with our Board of Education to ensure that we have a really excellent relationship in the work that we do. And this week, I can tell you, I've been with them a lot. Thank you very much. And it's been great. I've been able to spend time with them in their full group, but I've also been able to have one-to-one meetings with them, getting to know one another on a personal level. You can't always do that in an interview, and it's been really fun to kind of sit back and wonder, what questions are they going to ask me? And each one has kind of taken on its own flair. That's the best part about relationships, forming that connection. The second is, I want to understand how students learn in Madison. Okay? I taught high school biology, and I've been in thousands of classrooms throughout my career. But I'm most interested to find out what excites you about learning and what can I do to support that. Okay, so I want to know what your favorite thing is, but I also want to know what's the thing that you struggle with. Because in my work, I have to feel very good about what you love about learning, but I also have to be very good about finding why you struggle in some of the things that you do and looking for ways with our community to address that, to make it better. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. The next is engagement with the community. Engagement is not a one-way street. Okay? I can tell people things till I'm blue in the face. Sometimes they'll listen, most of the times they probably won't. Engagement is about how do we put information at the center and how do we interact around that. If it's a problem, how are we going to solve it? Not how am I going to, how are you going to, how are we going to solve it? If it's something we want to do that's great for the community, who else do we need? And if it's information, like, I know you've never heard this, but we're not having school today because it's snowing out. That's another way of engagement. I have to tell the community that we don't have school. So those are just some examples of the kind of engagement that I'm looking at. Engagement to me is dynamic, and we have to, again, focus on doing that work together. The last thing that I'll share with you about a priority that's urgent and important to me is to lift up what Madison is doing well, to lift up what the MMSD is doing really well. And I'll give 3 examples of visits that I had this week at La Follette and at Elvium. The first is I hadn't been back in La Follette since probably 2013, about the time I left. Many of you know that they have just gone through and continue to go through extensive renovation. It is a school that I would hardly recognize from the outside, having gone there and spending so much time there, playing and coaching on fields there, watching my older siblings there. I mean, that school is part of my life, a long part of my life. But I have to share, after touring it with Principal Thompson, what screamed to me at La Follette High School was the way that the school has been designed around the individual student and their needs. The spaces and places for individualized, personalized instruction to occur are out of this world. You know, as the former teacher and the former principal there, I can only imagine, I already am, what I would do with some of those spaces. and the ways that we could interact and engage with our students, with our families, with our community. When I walked in there, it felt very student-centered design. It was a really good feeling, a healthy feeling, something that's hard to do with old buildings, and it costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time to do that. So Madison community, thank you so much for your support for that. I saw evidence on Tuesday of why that referendum was so important. At Elvium, I got to be inspired by a group of 5th grade girls around Black Girl Magic and their service project that they've done in memory of Mrs. Bernard, a beloved former teacher who passed away. And I think this epitomizes the very best of learning. When you can take a love for reading, when you can take service and giving back to the community, when you can take understanding who we are and being proud of being a Black girl, and the list goes on and on and on. That project and the work that the students did, I told them how proud I was because I could see them beaming with pride, sharing with me that project, to me tells me that we need to do more of that. We need to lift students up and give them a chance to express who they are and do it in a way that it can make a difference in our community. And the 3 students I met, I'm sorry I didn't write their names down, impressive students. Really grateful that they were able to share that with me. And then in Madison, I know our dual language immersion program is something I've heard, again, continues to be both a source of pride, but also a desire for us to address and look for ways that we can improve it. And why shouldn't we? We want the very best for our students, and that's why I'm here and committed to that. And I think, again, it gives us an opportunity to say, what is it that we've heard from our community? And then how can we support that in improving it, making it better, making it accessible to more students, and making sure that our dual language immersion program truly represents the students in the Madison Metropolitan School District. So with that, just a little bit about some of the priorities that I have. Again, I want to thank everyone for being here today. And with that, I'm happy to take questions that you have for me.
Sam, first question, Sam.
Why did you decide to come back to MMSD?
That's a great question, Sammy. Why did I decide to come back to MMSD? Well, some of you know that Madison has had some superintendent openings since I've left. But at those times, my own children were still in school. And I had, wanted them to finish and didn't want to have to transition again. And I was also engaged in some really important work there that I felt I had to complete. I felt we had to get done. I didn't feel like emotionally I could leave at that time. But this time felt different. And I will tell you that my wife and I made a secret visit to Madison this summer and just kind of did everything we love about Madison. And it was really clear to me after that trip that it was the right time. So it really brought me back to come back and reconnect with my city, but to also meet students like you and understand how can I make school awesome every day for you. That's why I'm back.
Preston.
How will you handle all your job responsibilities? We have 50 plus schools and there are so many students, staff, and families.
It's a lot, and it's a lot of responsibility. It definitely is. I have 68 schools right now, so I know what it feels like to have a lot of schools. But here's what I'll say. Remember when I talked about people being at the center? One of my first priorities. Remember when I talked about team and together? This work is not about one person, not about one leader. So a lot of the leaders that you see around here today are those who are also deeply responsible for caring about and doing great work for our school district. So it is definitely going to be a team of people who support our schools, from our staff who are here, our principal, to our district staff, and to our community partners who really do a great job of wrapping their arms around our school communities. Thanks, Preston.
We'll take one more for the students. Edwin.
What's the most interesting thing about being a new superintendent?
That's a great question because I'm not a new superintendent. I've been a superintendent before, but it's definitely new coming into a new job. And I'll give you an example of that, Edwin. So I think I shared with you before that I went to Elvium, where Ms. Quisted was my kid's principal. I went to school there too. And when I drove there on Tuesday, I'm going to admit this to you, I got butterflies. I really did. It was kind of that nervous excitement butterflies. Do you know what that means? You kind of get that feeling like you don't quite know. It's exciting. You've been there before, but you don't know why maybe you feel that way. I had that feeling. And as I drove to Elvium, I drove right by my childhood home turned the corner, and there I was at Albion Elementary School. So it's exciting. There's a lot of what I think I'll share with people about being back in Madison is it's great to connect with people I know. It's also great to meet new people. But the best part is knowing that we're going to do work together.
So we'll take a couple of questions from press and reporters. If you would do me a favor before you ask your question, state your name and what outlet you're representing, just so we can collect that at the same time. First question.
Savannah Tomei, Spectrum News, Wisconsin. One of the biggest challenges for every superintendent here in Madison over the last decade, 2 decades, is the opportunity gap for students of color. What will you be bringing to that mission to try to close that?
You know, I think bringing is experience both here and in other places, but the truth is that success lies here. You know, what I can bring is certainly oversight, looking for ways to engage our community partners, looking for ways to make sure resources are directed in the way that are making an impact. But you will not address achievement gaps, opportunity gaps, unless you know your community and know what assets lie within your community. That's where it has to start. And I think that we've got to be very deliberate. I think we've got to be very open with our community around where our challenges are, report frequently about progress that we're making, and not be afraid at all to say, you know what, we're not making the mark here. We need to make a change here. We can no longer do this because it hasn't been effective. It didn't work the way that we thought. And, you know, a first-time superintendent, that might be really hard to do. I have no problem saying that this didn't meet the mark. Community, you deserve better. Students, you absolutely deserve better. And we have to do something different. And the other thing is we have to involve our community in ways. I talked about engagement. Engagement can't be, here's what your student's going to receive today. It has to be meeting families. You know, we talk all the time about some of the challenges in the community coming into school. There's also challenges in the schools never coming out into the community. And I think that's a bridge that I know it exists, but it needs to be strengthened. It needs to be open. It needs to be consistent, because there's nothing worse than showing up in a tie at a meeting and then never seeing that family or that community group again. And it's a big commitment on my part to truly be present in the community, but it's, I believe, how we're going to change some of the outcomes that have been historically here for too long, especially for our students of color. Children with disabilities, English language students, students experiencing homelessness. I mean, there are any number of students who bring real challenges with them, not to mention some of the emotional backpack, things that students have where we don't take the time to understand the individual unique students that we're working with and how that can be present in their learning. It could either be a barrier to their learning, but it could also, if we can address it, be a facilitator of their learning, if we can provide them with the right support.
Marcus Arsvold, WFTV. Previous relationship sort of with MMSD and news and communication and open engagement that you mentioned. What will you do differently than the previous administration?
Well, I can't really claim that I know what was done, just know that we're here to build a relationship. When I mention people as one of the priorities, I include media press in that as well. So we're going to have to work together, and it's my strong desire that we find ways to do that. If there are things that I can learn about how it's been in the past that will help better prepare me, I will certainly attempt to learn that, to make sure that either those same patterns or mistakes are not put forward in the future, but we've got to build a positive relationship moving forward.
Abby Mockshade from Wisconsin State Journal. You said engagement is a priority, learning from past mistakes is a priority, so how do you plan to forge that relationship with the media specifically?
With the media specifically, well, one thing is I'm a relational person. I'm a kid from the East Side, and that's how I grew up. We knew each other, we took care of each other, we watched out for each other, but I will also tell you, we didn't always agree. You know, so there are going to be times of conflict and disagreement, and I think any true relationship, the true test, is how do you respond to a disagreement. And I think by nature I'm a fairly humble person in terms of it doesn't affect me so much, but the relationships that we need to form, if they are in any way destructive to school communities or students, I will have a problem with that. That's where I absolutely will draw the line. I'm here to not protect our students, and our staff, but I am here to honor them, and that's something I take very seriously. So our relationship has to be two ways in that way, making sure that there is information that's accurate, that's timely, and is being portrayed in a way that honors our school communities.
Hi, I'm Kayla Wynn, I'm with the Cap Times. So you're walking into this position during budget season, as I'm sure you know. How are you feeling about the district's structural deficit? And what have you learned from St. Paul about balancing a budget while making sure it doesn't harm the students?
Trying to think of where I'd like to start. So I've been following the MMSD budget process. Great work by the team, by the way, in the way that they're working, the information that they've gathered. It's clear today that public schools are not funded to adequately meet the needs of students. They're just not. And there are some nuances and differences in Minnesota and Wisconsin, so I apologize if I'm kind of going back and forth with that. But I think the things that I've learned about that are our collective voice is really important. You know, we are not funded by the state in Wisconsin to the same amount that we are in Minnesota. That's just a difference in how the states are organized. But I will say one area here is that many in this community don't know that there is a $66 million cross-subsidy in specialized services. So the federally mandated services that not only are we mandated to offer, but we should be offering as a moral imperative to students who need those supports and those services. $66 million is how much we have to spend from Fund 10, our primary general fund, to cover those costs. And that just shouldn't be the case. The state of Minnesota advocated for 10, 20 years before I arrived, and for the last 10 years have been advocating. Well, this year, guess what? $22 million from the state to cover some of those costs. Next year, $27 million. That's collective voice. That's making sure that the state and the lawmakers and the legislature knows that these are serious problems that we're facing right now, and in part leading to the structural deficits. The other thing is our budget is based on student enrollment, 3-year rolling average here. That's something we have to pay attention to. Okay? Students, did you know that by the time, let's see, Emma, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking? 9. Do you know that in the next 25 years, so when you're 35 years old, that there are people, scientists, who are saying there will be more than 100,000 people, new people living in Madison? Right? It took me a while to get here today because of traffic. I can't imagine with 100,000 more people. So when I think about that, it is the perfect time for us to not think about budget in terms of what we don't have, right? That's easy to do. I can go down the doom and gloom of structural deficit, this is going down, and I know our business staff and finance staff, that's their job to give us the facts. But I've got to look at what are the opportunities here. How can we innovate to make the Madison Metropolitan School District the destination school district, not just in Dane County, but in this state, so that when new families are considering coming here with this boom of residents and new people coming, that they know that the Madison Metropolitan School District, A, will have its doors open, but B, will produce and provide a high quality education. That's really important to me with how we look at our budget in the future. Scarcity is important. We have to understand what the facts are. We have to provide a balanced budget to the board for adoption. But we also have to look at what the opportunities are as well. Because if we just continue to do that, it won't go away, and it could lead us into areas that I don't want to see Madison go.
Any other questions?
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yes.
So in response to Kayla's question, you talked about opportunities for potentially increasing enrollment over time. How do you plan to do that?
Well, one, we have to talk to our families and find out what is it that you want in your schools. You know, I've done some work with finding out why students leave or families leave, and again, I think that that's important to focus on, but I'd rather focus on what is it that folks want, and can we find ways to strategically to sustain any new investment, right? That's a hard thing too, and I've seen plenty of that in my career where we start something, it's great, and then what happens? Okay, and we're experiencing that right now. I hate to use ARP, but in many ways, ARP brought a chance to innovate in ways I never thought imaginable. $209 million just from ESSER 3, knowing that in 2024, September, that money was going to go away. But I will tell you that during that time of innovation, we did some incredible work. And a lot of it was based on what we heard from families. So that work will continue and be sustained, but we do have to ask the question is financially, will we be able to sustain that? So it's really important that I think we get that narrative from our families, from our community, what is it that they desire, and we work as hard as we can to deliver that.
Take another question from our students. Amina?
What was your path in becoming a superintendent? What schooling did you need and what jobs did you have before this?
All right, she wants to know about my schooling, being prepared to be superintendent, what jobs did I have? I'm looking at my watch. It might be a while. I want to admit or share with all of you, students, I want you to really listen to this. I was not always successful in school. I really struggled as a student in the Madison Metropolitan School District for a lot of reasons. Most of them probably my own, of not putting my best effort forward. I can admit that now. When I was 12, I don't think I would have admitted that. But I'll share with you teachers that I worked with who guided me. I'll mention one, my middle school teacher, Mrs. Bell. Her name is not unfamiliar to people because I talk about Mrs. Bell all the time. The first and only black teacher that I had really took me aside and pushed me to become a better student, but I even got to student teach with her as well. So I got to see her and spend time in her classroom with her to see how she did that. How did she find that magic to be there for students each and every day? I started as an educational assistant in the Madison Metropolitan School District at Lincoln Elementary School in 1993. I then went on to be a high school biology teacher. I was a coach. I was dean of students at La Follette. I was the principal at Toki Middle School, where Ms. Jensen came from. I was the principal at La Follette High School, and then for 2 years before I left Wisconsin, I was the assistant superintendent. And in order to do those jobs, I had to finish my degree in biology and be a licensed teacher in secondary education, secondary meaning grades 6 through 12. And then I got a master's degree so that I could become a principal. In Wisconsin, you need a license, a piece of paper that says you can be a principal. And then I further went on and got a doctorate in education, so I get another piece of paper that said you can be a superintendent. So I was a student for a long time, and I enjoyed most every minute of it. I truly did. So it's a great question, and it just shows you again that, you might get a bad test score, a bad grade in a class, but I'm convinced that if you get up and you learn from any mistake or any shortcoming that you receive, that you can learn from it, you can grow from it, and you can move forward from it.
Amy?
How do you know to cancel school for a snow day?
Is that a trick question, or you? We better not have snow tomorrow. I don't think there's snow tomorrow. So I have a longer story, but I'll give you the abridged version. In 2018, we had a pretty bad snow event in the Twin Cities. And even though it happened to everybody, since I was in the district that's in the capital city with the most accessible to media, it all focused on St. Paul. I'll leave it at that, but from that snow event, the National Weather Service, so those are the meteorologists and scientists all over the world, or the country, worked with us to provide some ways that they can help superintendents make decisions around snow days. And the information that I now get as a superintendent, if there's even the chance of snow, I get alerts, I get updates, I get up to the minute forecasts that can even break it down sometimes at the street level, because in a city that's spread out, it could be very different, sometimes even on different sides of the city. And for school buses to make their way around, it's a really important decision. So that's one piece, information, data. Okay, superintendents like to talk about data sometimes. But the real easy answer is this. Our transportation department gets up early in the morning, and they start the buses, and they start driving. And they have 5 or 6 or 7 different streets that are the tough streets that kind of serve as their test. And if they can make it through some of those streets, if they've been plowed or they've been salted or they're able to make their way, they give the recommendation that we're good to go today. So I really rely on the people who it's going to impact, the drivers. We want to make sure it's safe for students, and if it's not safe for drivers, it's not safe for students. So they're really hard decisions at times, but again, back to people. It's not one person, it's a team. Team. Let's try it again. It's not one person, it's a team. It's a team. It really is. Good question.
All right, last question from Dot.
What would you do for the school district that was different from the past few superintendents?
Oh, great question. So here's the thing. I wasn't here for the past superintendents. So some of the things I can hear, I can certainly react to. But I want to share this with you. Someone said they have a brother that goes to West. Dot. So what grade is he in?
He's a senior.
He's a senior. This is perfect. And we didn't set this up, I promise. So seniors, the class of 2024 Madison Metropolitan School District, when I left, were in first grade. So I've missed out on a lot of what their experience has been. And that's something that's really front of mind for me. That's something I think about a lot in terms of we're about to graduate, you know, hundreds of students in a little bit more than a month. And I really don't know what they've been through to get where they are. I certainly know the pandemic was hard. During that experience, I have some similarities there in terms of how we were serving students, but I've got a lot of work to do to learn exactly how students are learning in Madison and to find ways to help support those great experiences, but for us to look ways to create good experiences for every student. You know, not every student is successful in our school district, and I've always been committed to finding ways to ensure that every student is successful.
All right, last round, just any more questions from our press? Yes.
I'd like to ask about reading proficiency. So I know that was something that you really focused on in St. Paul. How important is it for you to address that here, and why is it important?
It's important to me because when you look at student data for reading proficiency, you clearly see that there are some students who are independent learners from the day they show up at school. I mean, they show up, they're already reading. You know, they might be advanced, they might be just thriving and doing great. But there are other students who show up and they are struggling. And the most difficult thing as a system leader is this, that if you don't have the resources to provide individualized support for every student who might need it differently, then you have to ask yourself at the end of the day, what did I do to make the learning experience better for that student? That's really hard to be challenged with. During the pandemic, before Science of Reading became a state law in Minnesota, the READ Act in Minnesota, I'm not familiar with what it's called here, so I want to be clear, the READ Act is the Minnesota version of the requirement for the Science of Reading. We invested $10 million in hiring 84 teachers trained in letters, which is a training, language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling, to provide Tier 1 support to students identified by a universal screener, FastBridge, which MMSD does use. But the important part of that is that it isn't the classroom teacher, it's the WIN teacher is our initiative. WIN stands for What I Need Now. And it's the WIN teacher that comes in and works with small groups of students throughout the day. And if I was taking you through a school right now, you might not even realize what's happening. And what I'm seeing in our classrooms right now is that the body language of students says, I'm a learner. It says I can read, and it says I'm really proud of my efforts. That's new for me, to see struggling readers actually being served in a way that's working, that's making a difference, and that by their growth data on FastBridge, when we look at our winter and spring results, is showing incredible growth. Now, I may not have the proficiency rates to back it yet, but I can tell you that I believe the trajectory is going in a really positive direction. So we've got a lot of work to do here to break down. I haven't even talked with our curriculum group here about this. I know there's a lot of similar work, but of course every district is different. Resources are different. What we call things is different. Lastly, I'll say about this, I was so inspired last year by a school visit that I made that I asked the teacher this year if I could come every 3 weeks and spend time with her, one of her classes. Because I recognized, I visited last May, students were doing great, but I wanted to rewind the tape. I wanted to see where students started in September and follow them through. So it's my class, and it's been really fun to engage with them and to see their progress, but to also see their struggles too. Learning's hard sometimes, right? And it should be, as long as you have support, as long as you have someone who can help you overcome some of the challenges you have. So that's what I'd say about reading. We have a lot of great work to do. I know that the Madison community is really excited to support that work, so I'm excited to learn, how we can do that together.
All right. Thank you all so much for coming. We're going to conclude our first conference at this time. Again, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.